Yeah. Oh, recording in progress. I already recording in progress. Yes, accept, please.
Olga, then it would be nice if you, I know maybe it's your plan to introduce all these beautiful people who is here with us tonight.
Should we mute it?
I think for now not, but maybe it's not disturbing. Yeah, it's not disturbing us right now. So okay, if it will be disturbed, I will tell. Yeah. Okay, dear friends, we have several wonderful presentations about different projects, and one of our projects will be from Australia. It will be the last one, but we start our trip right now from Singapore. There are 2 a.m. So can you imagine what kind of hero come to our event right now? Yeah, so Michael Cheng, who do a lot of job in playback community and develop center of playback theater too. So Michael, with all my pleasure, I send words to you for your start. And I think it's better if you say what about will be your sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, and
thank you, Olga.
Yeah, let's make your.
Okay, hello everybody.
We need, you know, I just want to acknowledge it. Some people need a translation, and if you hear the whisper, we're not talking together with you. This is the, you know, small translation happening. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
And
thank you.
One more moment. We have at least 20, not at least, the maximum, 20 minutes for presentation and then 10 minutes for questions. So dear participants, if you will have questions, feel free to ask it, okay? So let's start.
Okay, hello everybody. Greetings from Singapore. I know you've had a long day. I've also had a long day. Luckily, I have friends who have come along to help me share this with you. So here's the first friend. And you'll see different people coming up so that you don't fall asleep. So I'm going to share a project that I did a few years ago with seniors in the place where I'm staying in. And in most of my projects, playback is a part of it. It's not the only part of it, and it's not always performance. So I will share more in a bit. I'm going to look at the slides. I have a few slides to share. Don't worry, there will be photos as well.
Nice one.
It took time.
Yeah.
All right, it takes a while. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm back. So the project title is called Masak Masak. It's a Malay term. It has 2 meanings. One meaning is cooking. We're cooking food, making it mature, making it cooked. The other meaning is a game that we play when we are young, pretending to cook. So it has these 2 double meanings of cooking as well as playing. It is an intergenerational project, so it's not just about seniors. It's about bringing seniors together with young people and having an exchange. So I did this with another playbacker called Renee. I invited her to do this with me. I think some of you might know her as well. And I just wanted to say a few things about Singapore. It's a very, 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 very small country, very small island, and very young. We are only 56 years old. We gained independence in 65, which means that in just 56 years, there has been so many changes. One of the changes is that we have become one of the most rapidly aging populations in the world. Now, when in around 1970, I think 3% of the population is above 65. By 2050, 1 out of every 2 persons will be above 65 years old. So we are having a lot of elderlies very, very soon. At the same time, the seniors are also living longer. So if you're a biological female in Singapore, you can expect to live until 86 years old. And if you're a biological male in Singapore, you can expect to live up to 83 years old. So there are a couple of questions here. One is, with so many seniors in Singapore, what's going to happen to the healthcare system? How can we keep them as healthy as possible? And at the same time, how can we keep them active, mentally as well as physically? So I'll skip this. It's basically how fast we're growing older. Now, this project is happening in my estate called Queenstown. Queenstown is one of the oldest estates in Singapore. It's named after Queen Elizabeth of England because Singapore used to be a British colony. And here you see some of the really old flats. Now, in Singapore, public housing it's not just for those in need. More than 80% of the population lives in flats and buildings built by the government. So these are some of the really old flats, and because they're so old, quite a lot of them have been torn down and rebuilt into these beautiful looking buildings that are still public housing. So this is also an area where there are a lot of senior citizens, and this is one reason why we wanted to do the project here. Another reason is because there is a lot of history in this area, so we wanted to collect those stories and pass them on. So there are 3 main aims for the project. One is encouraging an active aging lifestyle for the seniors in this area. We also wanted the youth in this area to be able to bond, interact, and learn from the seniors. And lastly, we wanted to collect these stories and document these heritage stories. This is a structure. We met every week, 3 hours, 3 sessions, and people could sign up, but people could also just drop in. So the seniors might suddenly be walking past and we'll say, hey, do you want to come for this theater workshop? And they would come in. So across the whole month, we had 37 seniors. We also had a team of youth volunteers from the churches and the schools in this area. So there are a lot of people in the room at any one time. This is the structure of every session. We would be playing drama games. We would also have trigger activities. I'll say more about that later. And then the playback theater part, and then food, where we just sit around, buffet, and talk and share. So you can see how many people there are in the room, including seniors, including the youth volunteers. We were fortunate also to have the resources to be able to document this. So there were people taking photographs, people taking video, and also people recording down the stories, transcribing the stories. So when they first come in, the youth volunteers would go talk to the seniors, spend a little bit of time, because not everybody arrives on time. So they will go and interact with the seniors, and they also have an activity that they're supposed to do with them. So this is the beginning part. You can see some of the papers that's on the mirror. This is the activity that the youth volunteers are supposed to do with the seniors. It's sort of like a short interview, but more of questions that will get people to share. And in Singapore, the senior citizens, not everybody speaks English, and a lot of them don't write in English, so we do it in Mandarin as well. And here they can draw. Now, we also had a Polaroid camera, so it was part of the activity for them to take a photo with the volunteer, between the volunteer and the senior. And then, because it's instant, they would paste it on. And the questions are really simple. The top half is for the seniors, and the bottom is for the volunteer, and it's the same questions. What's my name? What do I like? And how I'm feeling today. So it's sort of a trigger for them to start talking to people that they don't know very well yet. Then we will get started. We sit around in a circle, we play drama activities and play drama games. Here you will see them sitting in a circle and passing expressions and actions around the circle. And some of you might know this game where we dance with sticks. So those who are not so mobile, they would be on the chairs and they would just dance. Others who could, they would stand up and dance with the volunteers and try to keep the sticks up. And this is still a warming up phase. It's still getting to know you. It's still getting comfortable in the space. And I'm going to bring in a new friend now. So this is my new friend who's going to continue the next part of the presentation. So this area has a lot of history. And we had other trigger activities. We would play songs. We would also show very old photographs of the areas and locations in this area to help them reminisce, but also it's a trigger for the playback part. We get them to sit around, we get them to look at all the photos, listen to the songs, then they will be in small groups sharing, led by the volunteers, and then after that we would do the playback part where there is more sharing. So here's a photo of two, they're torn down now, but these are two cinema theaters that we used to have in the area. We also had session themes. So I'm very proud of the themes. They sound very poetic and wonderful in Mandarin and a little bit more awkward in English. So we would choose which one of those that we wanted to do. Songs sung for you, and this would be like really old songs. We grew up like this, looking at life with laughter, dreams, changes, games played when we were children, and where my home is. So you can see a lot of these themes are about remembering the past, what stories they have, and of course we also want to go into how are they now. So this is the playback part. The playback is, so I forgot to say that we also had some training for the volunteers. We had 3 sessions before this whole project began. They were trained in playback, but they were also trained in how to interact, how to talk to the seniors, what to do when they don't understand the language, and also the structure of the program so they can help us to carry it out. Now the playback part, it's not as artistic as perhaps you guys are used to. It's very raw. It's very heartfelt. We laugh a lot. We sometimes redo some things because some of the seniors might point out certain things, and it's more of a container for us to continue the conversation. So the seniors. The playback part will always begin with the youth volunteers. Then when we get to the long stories, we sometimes invite some of the more enthusiastic seniors to take 1 or 2 roles in the stories as well. So they get to try out the playback part as well. And then there's the beautiful food part. It's buffet. They take what they want, and then we sit around and we chat. So you don't need to read everything, but I just wanted to, share some of the stories that came up. So one of the stories that was really heartfelt was people who have stayed in Queenstown for such a long time that it almost seems like a whole other country, a time where things were so cheap, a time where steak or French fries is a treat, where it's not so common, and people would, be so excited about going to the cinema, and the cinema tickets would also be like a few cents. But even for those few cents, some of us might have to save very hard for those few cents. So this story is about this lady thinking back to the time when her children were in school, and thinking about the kind of songs that they sang, thinking about the kind of treats that she would work very hard for to give them, things like Western food. And the last sentence especially, she was saying that the restaurant people thought she was very rich because the shop owner would always see her children there. And the mother works very hard so that the children can eat big things. Another story that I remember, you saw the cinemas earlier on. That was also a place where many people went for dates. So they would go there to eat, they would go there to watch cinemas. There used to be a fountain there. They might just buy one drink to share and they would sit there. And back in the days, you had to keep a distance because you're not married yet. So the way that they described the distance was you had to sit far enough so that a chicken could cross between the two of you. That was how much distance you had to have. And because we're all in this area, if you don't, then word might get back to your parents. And the same story, in those days, when you bring the girl home, you would also buy some food for the family, so that they will let you bring her out again the next time. So each time you would try to bribe them with some food, and just to show that you're responsible, you take her back on time. And sometimes this goes on for like 2-3 years. And even after marriage, there is still the expectation, if you come to visit, bring some food. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. That's the project. After the project ended, we basically just transcribed the stories, we shared the stories, we published the stories. And a few of them were still in touch, especially the seniors. And this was a special project in my heart because at that time, I had just moved here. I didn't grow up here. So it was also about me finding out about this area. I live in a new part of this town, this small little estate. But there's so many stories from the old parts of town that are also disappearing because they're tearing everything down to build anew. So that was one of the reasons why this project was special to me. And it was a lot more heartfelt than a performance. It was very raw. It was, what do we need to get people talking? What do we need so that the seniors can have fun? What do we need so that they can remember what they used to go through? And what do we need so that the youth can also carry these stories back to their homes and back into their future lives? Okay, so
Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, you did, I think, a great presentation right now.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very
I'm
much.
personally very impressed by it and touched. And I think we have just not 5, maximum 10 minutes, but for questions. So do you have any questions, dear friends? If yes, just take a mic and tell the question.
У кого есть вопросы? И давайте так, максимум 2 вопроса, чтобы мы двигались. У кого они есть, прям кидайте руки на микрофон и задавайте вопрос. And we will have maximum 2 questions. Have a question? Raise your hand and I will give you a mic.
Michael?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Roman. So my question is how, maybe I didn't get it from your presentation, and how you start the collaboration with this center, but where these seniors are. So how you start, because we also have in Dnipro, we also have this idea to start collaborate with the house with the old people living. So, and
for the seniors.
For the seniors.
Yeah, house for the seniors.
We also have this idea, and we're going to start it in September, maybe October. And my question is how you start this contact. So how you start relations with the administrator level, how you get connection with the community.
So previously, I had been involved in other projects in Queenstown. So that was how we started to get to know some of the local people with influence. And then we got in touch with the community center. So the community center are places where people gather. There's about one or two in every town. And because we were collaborating on a few things before that, we also got to know the elected official of this area. So once we got that kind of context, things were pretty easy. I have to say the context before that was about maybe 2 or 3 years of doing things here until people start trusting you, until people feel that, okay, there is something that you could do. So I think the key is, it's not just about touch and go, it's about how you make contacts within this area. And then at the same time, there's also the who do you go to make contact with? Who would be able to help you? So in this case, it's, it could be the uncle who knows a lot of people. It could be the officer in the office at the community center. It could even be the elected official, and it's part of strategy. Like if you're going to be doing applied theater work and community projects, we also have to think about who can help us and how we make contact.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helps that I was going to move here, and that was my entry point. I could say, hey, I'm going to be moving here. Who can help me about this and that? Where do I go to find this and that? So that was also one of the entry points. I hope that answered a bit of the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have a second question?
Есть вопросики?
No?
Темная ночь, только свистят по степи.
Just a song for you, Michael. Yeah.
Thank you. So if there are any questions in the days ahead, you know where to get me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much that you share your project, that you come this night for you. Yeah, and I think even if we haven't got project questions, we know that we can contact you and ask something, because I think you did very useful and wonderful work. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, and have a good night. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to take off. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, dear friends, I know that you're very tired, but I hope that our presentation will inspire you. And right now I will send the word, send the turn to Hani. And I know that Hani, he's one of the great leaders, I think, in Playback too, and did a lot of wonderful social projects in a very difficult condition. But right now he will share a very special project. So Hani, your turn.
Hello everyone. I really miss being with you.
We miss you on the camp.
Yeah, and I'm so jealous. But next year. So thank you, Olga, for the invitation, and I'm so happy to be here. I will share a little presentation I prepared. It's not a lot of information, just to guide me through talking about the project. So first, I'm leading a playback theater company in Lebanon. Lebanon is in the Middle East, and it's between Syria, Palestine, and Iraq, and also the Mediterranean Sea, if you are not familiar with it. So Lebanon went through 30 years of civil war that ended in the 90s, and the last clash of the civil war ended in 2014 in the city where I used to live for the past 10 years. Then the Syrian crisis took place in 2011, and then COVID started, and then the country started to collapse because of the bad political system that is taking place there. So public or a revolution by the people started against the regime, and then last year in August 4th, a huge blast and explosion took place in the country in Beirut, where also the whole system of the country collapsed. And saying all these kind of like seeing all these events happening, or like living for the people in Lebanon, they kind of it kind of brought them to a very kind of bleak and also dark period where um, people are suffering on physiological, psychological, political, economic levels. So I'm in 2015 and 17 I created a playback theater group in one of the front lines of the conflict. You can see between these two sorry my God, these two build so between these two buildings there's a front line between two neighborhoods that they were fighting for 30 years. So we created the project for the kids who are coming from these two neighborhoods. And the project's supposed to be in-person playback performances in the studio that we created there, but because of COVID, we moved to experiment with online playback theater for children. So we started the experiment in the beginning because there was a huge need for protection intervention for kids, because in the organization I work there in the area, we started to see that a lot of children needs psychological intervention. They need psychological follow-up from psychologists and psychiatrists and psychotherapists, and also their families need some immediate intervention in terms of rehabilitation for their houses and also other needs on physiological basis. So we wanted to create a space for children to come together and to share how they are living daily, how they are experiencing life, and during this collapse that taking place in the country. And by then we can identify hopefully the most vulnerable kids that needs very specific intervention, and we have our social workers with us taking the names of these kids and then follow up with their families to do the intervention needed for each. So we are still in the project. So we had in the beginning 4 online performances for almost like and 2 in-person performances for almost 200 children. The children are coming from different sectarian backgrounds, Muslim sectarian backgrounds, and also Syrians and Lebanese. They are from the age of 10 to 17 years old, and they are living in a very, very bad economical situation. So yeah, what we did was a bit experimental, because we never ever worked with children, especially online. So we had to um, divide the project to 3 phases. The first phase was pre-performance, pre-project, where we divided our work into 3 kind of sections. First, to focus on our social group, what is the socioeconomic and political background of these children and their families, to study this and to understand this. to study the child protection needs, what child protection means, and how we can approach it, what is violence against children, and what is bullying, because we identified the need to talk about bullying, and also to create a referral mechanism and the referral system to refer these children in need to specific services outside. Then we worked a bit on what is a playback theater performance for children. Should we do the same arc of performance? Should we do sociometry? Should we do short forms and long stories? Should we do like actors introduction and closing? And then we came together and we created a special kind of format with the help of um, our one of our supervisors. And then we moved to work deeply on training the team on storytelling language, metaphors, how we can use metaphors online, and how we use objects in playback theater, and the most important thing, how we can have the courage to work with children, because we were extremely scared to do this project. Then we moved to the playback performance. First, we thought that we need to be very serious. We needed to talk about violence against children and to talk about protection and very serious talks with them, so we can identify the most vulnerable cases so we can refer them. But after the first performance, we had a huge shock because the children themselves made us change our mind, and it was way simple and playful because they were very playful and simple. So we had to drop a lot of ideas we had and a lot of complications we wanted to do, and we just like started by introducing ourselves and like telling them about what we want to do, start the performance. And then we were surprised because all the children, most of the children didn't want to talk about protection and violence and, you know, all these kind of hard topic. They wanted to talk about their dreams and their hopes. What do they dream when they become bigger, and what kind of like hopes they have for the future. And by then we still could do the referrals because we could identify also from these kind of stories they shared what do they need and where we can send them or send their names. So these basically was these steps we went through, and we through this kind of process we found that we had kind of four magical elements in this project. The first one was like children, they knew better what do they want than us. We thought in the beginning that we know everything and we will do what we know, but then they shifted our mind and we dropped all our plan and we started from scratch by seeing what do they want to tell. Then we were surprised by the magic of playback theater because it was very important for us the moment that the child tells a story and the story is really simple, and then seeing it enacted in online on the screen and see himself or herself in the enactment, that was very magical, and the whole house behind the child was like interacting with it because the child was like used to be very like excited about seeing what is in the screen about his or her story. What was also very special, that whenever the stories starts, every child start to kind of say like, I have a story too, I want to tell. It's also me too, I want to feel or to experience this. So it was for us very magical as well. Sometimes we could not finish the performance because children were screaming behind the screen that I want to tell a story, I have a story, you cannot stop now, we want more. So it was like a bit sad sometimes to say the performance is coming to an end and we need to stop, but then we invite them to another performance. And the last point was we were very also surprised because children were always ready to tell without activating their adult mind that they don't have yet. So they were not defensive, and they were like, the story was very ready, like the emotions in the story and the story itself were very ready, and it was very kind of authentic. So these were very important moments for us, and like highlights in the project. These are some photos. We didn't take photos for the children. We only our actors. And then we did. Sorry. Yeah, and then the project was done with United Nations in Tripoli, and then we decided maybe playback theater is a very important tool to add to their projects, and we decided to keep going with playback theater and their psychological intervention. So the plan now is to give playback performance on every third session of child protection or psychosocial support for children. We will do also 4 workshop performances where we include games, drama games, and playback performances for the same group for several times. For those who are like in need for a certain specific follow-up, and we will do training for playback group in the city so they can also keep doing the work. And we added the listening hour method also to work with the volunteers and the community workers who work with these children as self-care tool. So this is basically the project. It's still going on, and yeah, hopefully it will be running for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hani. And I don't know I have questions, but I send turn to participants. And again, Hani, it's you for me personally, it's so interesting how you combine all your ideas and structure it for us, because there are a lot of keys already for our practice. So, okay, questions.
I don't know. I just want to say that it's a blessed job. So blessed.
Thank you.
I have no question. I just want to say that so karma is like a 3 generations in front clip. Really amazing.
Shirley. Hi, friend.
Hello.
In Israel, we also did some work with teenagers, and we had online, and we had a few challenges. So I'm wondering, how did you overcome it? One is, how did the children have computers or telephones or anything, because it was a problem? How did you overcome the fact that they didn't want to show themselves on the screens, because we have a problem, they wanted to be, but close the screens. It was a big challenge. And another one is what happened with the Wi-Fi, because we all the time had problems with the Wi-Fi. It was horrible because we couldn't understand. And did you have any challenges like this?
Yeah, we have the same exact challenges as if we are living there. So first part of the project and the design of the project, we asked the donor, the funder of this project, to provide 3G cards for each child to support them, so we can avoid the Wi-Fi cut because we don't have electricity in Lebanon. So we had a recharge card for each performance to maintain the connection. Second, we in Lebanon, I mean, after COVID, we experienced a lot people not wanting to be on screen. So well, we work together with the team to work with voice only voice stories. So sometimes we take only voice, and sometimes some teenagers, especially girls, because they are ashamed to talk when they are boys, sometimes they only write their stories in writing, and then I do it through storytelling. I try to tell it back as much as I understand from it, and then I check with the teller about it, and then we play it back. So every story, whatever is the medium, even writing or telling only by voice or by video, Cam was welcome. So, and we were ready to try.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
May I ask small question?
Yeah, sure.
Did you meet during your performances this topic of conflicts and fighting between neighborhoods? Was it appeared? Yeah, and the second question is when
One
you...
question, Olga, one, please.
Okay.
So after the second online performance, we wanted to do in-person performance. So we invited the same kids, and we did in the studio this performance. And I was also conducting this performance. So in the online performance, there was no talking about the conflict in the neighborhood, but when the children came together to the space and they were physically comforting each other, I would say, without words. The topic came with them. So I did some also drama games, and we started by geographical mapping where they come from. And by this geographical mapping that they saw each other, the stories of the conflict appeared, and the type of stories were very difficult because most of the stories were shared about kids that lost their parents in the civil war by snipers from the other side. So yeah, this type of stories came out, and then we tried to navigate through these kind of stories, and in the end, the children were talking about what they want to do to overcome this 30 years of clashes. Because I think it was the stories of their parents, not something sometimes they never experience, but they have it in them. Stories that they have heard and they were told. And it was interesting because in the beginning of the performance, they were sitting on two different sides, but in the end, they were sitting next to each other, and some of them shared that we never met someone from the other side, and for us it is weird because we are kind of alike, we are similar, we have somehow similar stories. So yeah, it was one of the most touching kind of performances. The online performances were very strong for us, but it was, I would say, lighter in terms of talking about the conflict. I
Maybe
think
they
because
become more ready after contact with
yeah, maybe, and I think maybe also the screen also hide a lot of emotions when you are behind the screen.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Hani.
you.
Yeah, it's very inspiring, and so many
Thank you.
ideas came to our heads. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ooh, I hope you still have little bit energy in your muscles and in your soul. And I will send the words to Heidi from US, who will share with us unique project too. And she's experienced person in playback and very active in playback community. So Heidi, your turn.
Thank you. Thank you. And oh my goodness, I wish I could be there with you guys. Maybe post-COVID, my first playback camp is in my future. So yay! So the particular project I'm going to talk to you about today happened before COVID, and I know it's hard to imagine. And listening to Hani talk about his work online just reminds me how much easier it is to do it in person. And we're going to get back to it. I fingers crossed. Before I get into the particular intervention we did, I want to give you a little bit of context. In the United States, about 73% of all agricultural workers are immigrants. Most native-born Americans do not do the actual work of providing food for us. And yet, there is a big disconnect, or a lack of respect for the average native-born U.S. citizen towards people who come to grow and harvest and process our food. And that 73% is made up of guest workers who are brought in to do work, undocumented workers, people who cross the border without permission to look for work, and then other immigrants who can't find other work other than this form of a very backbreaking hard labor. I formerly lived in the state of Virginia, and about a decade ago, myself and a dear friend of mine formed a playback company called Inside Out Playback Theater. And one of our members worked for an organization called Legal Aid Justice. And this is an organization across the United States that works with underserved communities, providing low-cost or free legal help. And she was particularly, this member of our group was particularly working with migrant worker, agricultural worker communities. And she would go in to talk to them about safety, about how to resuscitate a friend if they get hurt. That was how she was able to go into agricultural worker communities without getting the attention of the companies. And underneath that, she was talking to the workers about their rights and the things that actually they legally had had access to in the country. Now, if the companies that these people were working for had found out about what she was doing, or in any way discovered that this was going on, she would have got kicked off of the property. Not that she could be arrested, it was all legal what she was doing, but the companies continue to have so much control over where these people live, their access to food, their access to healthcare, that it can be very dangerous for the workers themselves to investigate their legal rights. That's the context. And they were the company she was working for Legal Aid Justice was having a lot of trouble connecting with the workers because they didn't want to talk to them for obvious reasons. They didn't trust them. They were scared. They could be deported. They could be jailed. They could be fired and not have access to their livelihood anymore, to their income, and their families could be cut off. So she had this great idea. Why don't we do storytelling? Why don't we bring in our playback group to go to the places where the migrant workers were living, whether it was on company dormitories or in caravan parks or trailer house parks, and let's just share stories. Let's hear their stories. Let's create a bond of trust and communication, and therefore create a relationship where they may come then to Legal Aid Justice and take advantage of the services that were offered. So we agreed, we as Inside Out Playback in Virginia agreed, actually jumped at the opportunity to do this, and spent some time preparing for that in a number of different ways. First of all, one of the big barriers is language. Most of the migrant workers come from countries in Central America speaking Spanish or indigenous native languages, or from Haiti. So they're speaking a version of Creole French. And so we had to find playbackers that were, at least a majority of us, that were fluent in one or both of these languages. And so we went in with a team that was, half of us were fluent in Spanish. We also had some French, one person who was fluent in French, and the rest of us had some facility in both languages. And then we worked, previous to going in, on working with translation. And you all know this much better than we did at that point, because you're translating right now. We had never worked with different language groups, and so that delay in translation was something we needed to get used to not let that interfere with the spontaneity. And so we spent a great deal of time playing back stories that had to be translated, so that there was that process. And also it became very important for us to go in with a great deal of humility. These are people who are consistently ignored by the communities they live in. The native-born Americans tend to see past them, to not value them, to not be interested in who they are, and have no interest in their stories. So they're used to flying very, very low under the radar, euphemistically speaking, and avoiding the spotlight, avoiding drawing any attention to themselves. So how did we go as a group of English-speaking Americans and say, we want to hear your stories? And so there were some processes that we went through to build that connection, to be invitational, and to create a space that said, yes, we want to hear what you have to say. All right, I'm going to show you some pictures and give you a sense of how this worked. All right, so we worked particularly with migrant workers on the eastern shore of Virginia, which is one of the top tomato-producing areas in the United States. And you can see there a man during COVID with his mask on, sitting among the tomato plants on the eastern shore. Next to that, you see a picture of buses. This is the load the workers on the buses, drive them to the fields, drive them back to the dormitories. Just a sense of the amount of control that they had on people's lives. The dormitories were very rudimentary. This is where we performed. We would come to a field, we would see clotheslines, and we would set up our performance spaces in this environment. So this is a couple photos of us in performance. The one on the left is us under a tree. It was raining when we were doing this. And the one on the right is at a caravan park where families were living. So in the dormitories, you had primarily single men and women living in gender-specific dormitories. And then in the caravan parks, we would have whole families coming to us. And I think Hani said it so beautifully. The kids were the ones that wanted to share their stories. They weren't putting on the adult part of their brain, or that bit that says, I can't talk, or I don't feel comfortable sharing. They would jump forward. They would bring their parents with them to share stories. And it was so much easier to get that conversation going with the audience, and we had children in the audience. It worked both times, but the kids were such a gift. So a couple things that we took away from this was that it was difficult for people to share their stories on their own. They would say, oh, that was my experience. I go along with what that other person said. They didn't want to share their own story. They wanted to build on each other's stories. So this was the big divergence that we took from traditional playback theater. It wasn't a single person's story that we would play back. There were some of those, some individual stories, but we would build community stories. And we did this more our second year than we did our first year. As we thought about how these people depend on the community and share so much in common with each other for survival, that we were actually collecting, here's a story of a time that we made a meal together, and this is what I contributed, and this is what I contributed. Just a little side note, food was huge. I think, like many of us, they loved their food, and it was one thing that provided a time of sharing and community was this opportunity to make food together. And I talked about engaging families and how the kids would bring their parents into the arena and share stories. It became difficult to maintain the ritual. As you can imagine, we're in this odd space. There's people driving by, there's people walking through, but maintaining that container of safety and storytelling was something that we worked hard to do, using the blocks, the cloths, the musical instruments, and blankets on the ground. And deep listening. We had to not only work to understand in stories in different languages, but catch nuances even more because of the language difficulty or the language disconnection from the storyteller. And then work on using forms that didn't require everybody to speak the same language. And it's something that I took away from this in terms of narrative articulation. I remember attending the pre-European playback theater gathering with Jonathan, and he talked about narrative articulation and how you, as a playbacker, just need to share the story and sort of free ourselves from the need to dig deep into the story, dig out all the psychological stuff. It's there. And our responsibility as playbackers is to just tell the story. And that really resonated for me in this particular situation because we didn't know the whole story. We didn't know how it impacted the rest of the group, but trusting that was what happened. These are just a couple more shots of us performing. We were using headlights of cars for lighting, and people would, as you can see in the picture on the left, there's just a few people that are close. As the evening went on, people would move closer and break that space between the performers and the audience. There would be this great chasm. And we found that we were successful in a couple of different ways. The biggest one is that legal aid justice connected with people more and was able to increase the number of cases they were able to take on to help people get support for health problems, get support for wage discrepancies, and so forth. So in that way, it was helpful. But also, we would chat with people before the show or walk around inviting people. And people were very reserved, very understandably. But by the end, I would say probably a half to 2/3 of the audience would stay and want to talk to us. And recognizing that not all of us were fluent in their native languages, that wasn't an obstacle. We would work hard, and they would try and work with me, who is not very good in Spanish, And I would have conversations, and they really became invested. And it was very similar to other playback performances. You find, audiences want to stay and talk. You've now become their friends because you've shared their stories, and this was so true in this situation too. So if you want to know more about this, this is Olga read about our work in this book put out by Playback North America, and just as a good way to look into the work we did and how we broke it down and the forms we used and how it was very helpful in this particular context. And my contact information is in the book, as well as on this slide. And then finally, this is our group. We are a very diverse. This group still exists. I had to leave Virginia. I no longer live there, but this is a very diverse group of storytellers, and our focus is on finding separate communities, which in the United States are often separated by color of skin, and share those stories across the divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, dear Heidi. It's again, so many ideas how to plan work, how to go, and how you have to take time to create a contact with people. It's very important part to do real good project for communities. Thank you so much. And I ask again, do we have some questions from audience?
Yes, we do, from Karin.
Karin.
Hello, Olga. Hello, Heidi. How many performances did Inside Out do for this community? How many performances for the same?
So we did this 2 years in a row, and it's about the location is about 5 hours from our home area. So we would go and we would spend a full week in this area, moving from location to location and doing performances every night. So we would do 6 or 7 in a week, but we did this 2 years in a row, and we hope to go back post-COVID and do this some more. But it was intense. It was very strategically set between planting and harvest, so they would have the workers would have more time to attend. And it also was as early in the summer as possible, so very much on the toes of the planting season, so that then the workers would be connected to legal aid, and legal aid could be more effective in their advocacy for them as the season went on.
Oh wow! So Heidi, I understood right? So you spend a week there?
Yeah.
I forgot to say that, didn't I?
It's interesting.
Did you?
I think it.
Wait. Was it the volunteer work?
Oh, very fine question. Legal Aid Justice provided our housing, and then we got grants from non-government organizations to cover our travel and food. And there was no payment for us. It was a week we took off from work.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Do we have any other question?
No.
No?
From Utah.
Okay.
You said that you were afraid.
Utah, can you come close, and because when you are far, we hear you a little bit.
Oh, you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, now better.
It would be interesting. We were wondering, Konyemi, did the founders react? The organization, did you get any official resonance of them? Were there problems, or maybe even did you initiate any change? I mean, it would be too much to expect, but just to know.
That's a great question. We would arrive at the locations, particularly the dormitories, after dinner, So they would be the workers would have come back from the fields, would have had dinner, and then we come. So there were very few to no company representatives there. So we were flying very low under the radar. They didn't know about us until afterwards, and they didn't know our schedule, so that we didn't have any problem with that. We got rained out once. It was pouring down rain, and clearly we couldn't perform then, but that was fine. As to change, it's hard to make a direct connection, except that we do know that people taking advantage of legal aid services did go up significantly after we were there. And then the second year when we came back, the people remembered us and were excited that we were coming and bring their friends. So the crowds were much larger that second year. And the reports from Legal Aid Justice, which were what was very important to us because we weren't staying there, were that people were talking about it and celebrating teatro, that we brought teatro. And when was teatro coming back?
Thank you.
Bravo, thank you so much.
So, dear friends, I think, thank you very much again for Heidi and for Hani and for Michael, because really it's very great that you shared with us. And we have and so we have a video presentation from Emily, who was our participants of the camp previous time, and her presentation about work with students about topic of racism. It's a video presentation, and I know that you are very tight right now. So maybe we will, with our organizational team, we will decide how we will present it.
By Telegram, and maybe you can share also with Michael, Hani, and Heidi this beautiful presentation. So that's
but anyway, Nastya, I would like, it's important to say thank you to Emily after it, because I know that she did very good work.
Let's talk about it later.
Yeah, so of course we will share, but I think it will be good if after it someone could share their feedback about this presentation of Emily, because what I saw, it's really very interesting, and she put a lot of efforts to do it. So that is why I'm talking about it right now. And by the way, my last word will be about sending tone to you, my dear friends, to the campers, because soon in 2 days, you will have your own meeting about sharing your own projects and your ideas of projects. And because I'm sure that in camp right now, you have a lot of gifts to stimulate your projects and your development. So have a good evening, good rest, and thank you so much that you come and spend this time with us online people.
Thank you so much.
And by the way, just so we all can catch up.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
Yeah, so, yes, I'm switch off this camera. Yeah, bye. Thank you. Yeah.
So we have